So quite a lively debate there. What stood out for you guys? What stood out for you?
I think what stood out for me is actually their lack of vision. When they were asked what their vision for Wellington was and to give one idea, I was really unimpressed with their sort of lack of ideas. And I think I'm underwhelmed by the Mayoral campaign, and Wellington needs more than just fixing pipes and potholes. While that's very important, we do have an infrastructure crisis. Wellingtonians deserve more than that. We need some ideas to take our city forward and shake it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I was quite struck, Peter, by Paul Eagle's continued reference to a review. He wants to put it under review. Is that good enough when you're running for the mayor of a major city?
I was stunned, frankly, by his apparent lack of preparedness for this major role. He didn't seem to know a lot of things, or he didn't seem to want to know a lot of things. On the other hand, I thought Andy Foster had a lot of detail, but there wasn't much passion. Tory Whanau had lots of passion, but again, not the detail. Maybe if you amalgamated at least two of the three, you might get a candidate.
Lara, what about you? What did you think?
I thought that, so what's coming through with Paul Eagle is that idea that he's going to hit the ground reviewing, and that's not necessarily going to come across so well with voters, because the other two have more detail, kind of a bit, not less, maybe less of an overall plan, but they can hit with detail, with numbers and that sort of thing. So on that surface level, the idea that, oh, I'll put in place a review doesn't come across so clearly. And I think it speaks to his broader campaign, where it hasn't necessarily come across that he's got as much of a plan and wants it as much in that. Yeah.
Georgina, was it interesting to you that Paul wouldn't say whether he would be going back to Parliament or be staying on as the MP for Wellington? Is that important in this race? Does he really want it?
I feel very strongly that Paul Eagle needs to say what he's going to do if he loses. Ratepayers and voters deserve to know. It's unfair on them that he's not being upfront on that. I asked him that question when he announced, so he should have an answer to that by now.
Peter, as a former Member of Parliament, what would you expect in that situation?
Well, I think he's in an invidious position. If he wins, fine, he could be the mayor for the next 3 years. If he loses, then I think he's got to really question his future in Parliament, not because he's done anything wrong, but because it's a bit of a blow to morale. And, you know, he's part of the 2017 Labor intake. He's one of the few that hasn't been promoted yet. So it suggests he's not going anywhere. So does he carry on as a backbencher forever, or does he move on and do something else? And I think voters do need to know the answers to these questions. It's about commitment.
Yeah, and Georgina, why is it so important to you to know that?
Because, you know, if he's just going to go back to Parliament, then I feel like we're just his, you know, sort of plan B. And I think that's unfair on Wellingtonians. I'm also, I guess, concerned about Tory Whanau also saying, well, you know, I'll just go for the Green Party list. I mean, is this more about central government ambition than actually being the leader that Wellington needs?
Yeah, it was interesting to me too when Tory Whanau said that. What do we think of her as a candidate? She's somebody who doesn't have any elected experience. She says that's sort of her greatest strength, but it is also her greatest weakness, isn't it?
Yes, so one of the things that's been quite noteworthy about her campaign is she did come out really early with it, like far earlier than anyone else, that she was going to stand and run. And so that has meant that she's been able to get out to events and be like quite upfront about running for mayor, where we haven't seen that through Paul Eagle. I think that's a really hard thing to come up against, but she's managed to, I think, through her campaign, build on that being a real weakness to try to turn it around to be about central government. Then, of course, the counterfactual to that was your point, that it kind of doesn't necessarily look like she's dedicated to local government, but you can actually see through her campaign her building that and reframing it to look like a strength, which I think's something that you kind of want in modern politics, that people are going to be media savvy enough to do that.
How have things, I've been surprised as I've been looking at all of these issues about how many problems Wellington has. It's my hometown, I grew up there, I have very fond memories of it being a great place to live and a great place to grow up. But how have things got so bad? Wellington's lost its way, hasn't it, Peter?
Yeah, and it hasn't just happened in the last 3 years. It's been happening over a long period of time, and we've had a succession, I think, of quite dysfunctional councils for a variety of reasons. And a lot of these issues which have been simmering or bubbling below the streets have been there. I can recall, I think it would be at least 10 years ago, there was a major upgrade of all the city's infrastructure, major pipes in the inner city. Streets were disrupted forever. And yet now we seem to have more problems as a consequence. So it's a long-term problem, and one of the things that worries me about this mayoral election is I don't see any of the candidates having the leadership capability to actually resolve it, partly because they don't control who's going to get elected to the council.
And it is known to be a very dysfunctional council, isn't it?
Yes, it is a council accused of being dysfunctional and infighting. And Peter's right, the mayor has to remember that they're only one vote. And the biggest issue for them is being able to work together with people successfully. And on the issues in Wellington, I mean, the street that I live on in Miramar in the eastern suburbs is a classic example. On one end of the street is a pothole that's been there since March and has only just been fixed after repetitively opening back up with asphalt being poured on it. And on the other end, there's a massive slip from all the rain we've had.
What do you think, Lara, of these candidates in general? They're not what you would call sort of top-tier candidates, are they?
Well, look, what I would do is take that question before that you had for Peter back to that basics of that question, is that I'm not sure that anyone actually thinks that their local government functions well. That's not a theme that I kind of hear through sort of politics in New Zealand. And that's where I guess, I don't know if we have hope for the local government review and potential reforms in that area, but it just doesn't seem like it's a system that is working very well for people. I mean, we always say turnout's a sort of an indicator of that, but yeah, is that the kind of broader question? Because even as an Aucklander, the Aucklander on the panel, the Aucklander here, I still would say the same thing about my local government.
Well, you're a politics lecturer. What can we do about that?
Well, I think it is like, that's where I'm kind of interested to see what that independent panel for that local government review will actually, and then what will get implemented from that, because it's not clear. Like, firstly, like one of the points that we all make is that everywhere's got a different voting system and a different structure, which is super confusing. We're postal voting, turnout's low, like it's just all of those sorts of real basic things. Like, firstly as well, like no one really knows what local government does. Like, we have one lecture in a whole politics degree for 1 hour. Yeah.
Well, see, you look at all of these candidates, whatever their plans are, they're reliant on getting a majority around the council table.
Yes.
And, you know, any mayor in any council can have all of the vision you like, but if they can't actually do the numbers, they're going nowhere. And I think one of the challenges for whoever wins the Wellington mayoralty is how you assert, you know, Paul talks about leadership, Andy talks about leadership, how you actually assert the mayor's authority on the council to get something done. Otherwise, they just become, as they have been, talk fests going round and round in circles.
Well, I want to ask you, it's a difficult question, we're all looking into our crystal balls here, but who do you think came out on top today? Who do you guys think might get this?
STV, you know, that's the factor here, and incredibly hard to poll. Local government generally, but STV elections, I'm like, good luck polling companies.
I think it's notable how tight the race is between Tory whānau and Paul Eagle, if recent polling is anything to go by. That surprised me. I would expect Paul to be further out in front, considering he has been the Deputy Mayor, he's the current MP for Rongotai. He has strong name recognition, and that's everything in local government. So that really surprises me. I also think there might be a road for Andy to come back up through the ranks. It was interesting to me that a candidate called Ray Chung showed up in polling, and I imagine his second preferences would go to Andy. So again, STV, there's a lot at play there.
Peter, what do you think? Sorry, did you have a...
I was just going to say, I think on the basis of today's debate, you had a couple of things became quite clear. You've got the mayor who's got policy almost pouring out his ears.
But can't get it through.
Can't get it through. The other candidates who've got sort of waffly dreams about things to do, but may have more popular appeal. It comes down to the preferences, I think, when the voting takes place. And it could well be, actually, that Tory whānau picks up preferences from both sides and comes through. And I think he's got a path through Ray Chung, and possibly maybe some disaffected Labour voters may opt for him over Paul Eagle, but it's very fluid, I think.
Oh, there's still a couple of weeks, 12 days to go, I think, until the election. It will be fascinating to see. Thank you so much for joining us here on our Wellington Debate special panel.